So we have the user registration working. Notice that when we add a new user and we do a register, notice that if we refresh the page, right? If we refresh the page, notice that the username is not going to be there, right? Refresh, it's gone, right? And the reason is that we recycle the browser. All the arrays went back to their original values, which don't include Dan, right? And don't include that ID. So this ID actually has no meaning anymore, right? When you refresh the page, correct? Because all of this information is being stored in the cache of the browser. When you refresh, everything is gone, right? For this to actually work, we would need something that has a longer session, right? It has a longer life cycle, like a server, or definitely a database, right? That can be there for long-term storage. Right. So this works, but only for the life cycle of the current session of the browser. All right. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the yes.
Is there like, I assume there is, we'll do it, I assume, but like, would you want to like block access to this profile page from any?
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. We'll do that when you get to security.
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll see that it's a little bit more involved, securing single page applications than server-side applications. Yeah, and we'll talk about all those things. Yep. All right, so we have Dan, and let's create or one of the users that already exists, right? We already have Bob, certainly. And if we find Bob, right, we can go to Bob's. Here, if you refresh, notice that it's always there, right? Because remember that this works because the array, we hard-coded it in the service, right? So we always have the data for Bob, okay, even if you refresh the page, okay? So let's use Bob for now so that we can refresh and keep working throughout this prototype, right? So let's add here a link that would allow us to navigate to Bob's websites, all right? So let's do that. Let's add some of the navigation that we need for the web service, for the website list. Let's see. Let's go in here, undergrad. First of all, let's refactor app a little bit. Right. Notice that we had to create three different routes for the user data type. Right. We're probably gonna have to create another 3 for the websites, another 3 for the pages, and several others for the widgets. Right. So this is going to get fairly involved, right? So one of the things that we might want to do is to split this file into different files, yes, into separate files. One that configures the routing for users, one that configures routing for websites, well, that one configures routings for pages and whatnot, or at least divvy it up by feature, right, or by entity. So let's first start by moving at least this into a separate file all by itself that only does configuration. Right now we're only configuring routing, but certainly there'd be much more configuration stuff that we need to do. So let's move this into a dedicated page. I'm going to enter a dedicated file. I'll call it config. That's a very common name for a file that only does configuration. So our original app, we're not going to do the configuration here in the app, so let's remove that from here. That responsibility has been moved away into its own dedicated config file, right? And as we grow in complexity, we're going to split this into its own individual config files depending on the data type and whatnot. Yes? But let's start with this, with just a simple config. So the difference here is very minor. The only difference here is that we're not declaring the module. The module already exists. We're just reading the module, and we're just configuring it. Yes, we're adding a configuration to it. Make sense? So that's the only difference here. We just have to go back to our index page and make sure that we load that config. All right. So let's see. Let's see if we broke something. Okay, it still works. Right? We can still log into Bob. Questions? Makes sense. Yes. All right. So let's keep working on this config. let's add now routings for the list of websites. And what we're going to do here is that we are going to add an additional route here that is specific for the list of websites, right? And notice that as this grows, right, we'll see that there's a pattern, right? We're following a pattern. There is structure to the syntax of this URL. It's not just any URL, right? We are deciding to follow a hierarchical structure, right? Very much like what the RESTful APIs follow, right? That there is a parent, right? And there are children, right? These are the websites within the context of a particular user. Make sense? Right? And this will grow, right? It will be websites and pages and widgets, right? So we understand that. Yes. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Is it ever like bad practice to put all this stuff in the URL? Because then like someone who's using your application like now has all this data. Like if you're putting like the user ID, which is like
Yeah, definitely we don't want the user ID, and we'll remove it when we get to security, right? But in general, it is a good practice to put everything you need on the page, all the state information that you would need, right, to recreate the original page, right? There are some mechanisms where some of the information here might be compromising information, and so there's a hashing that occurs where you hash all that ID, right, and then you use that publicly, right, and that ID, and then that hash can only mean something to you on the server side, right? But in general, right, it is a good practice to use state information on the URL. Yes.
And what if some of these get encrypted sometimes, as you said, or you just pass them the forward the request, the JSON, which gets encrypted too.
Yeah.
But even if you pass it that way, if you're using some kind of token to access the API and you're not sure the password,
Yeah.
how do people use that?
Right. So well, the thing is that you all that state information about who's currently logged in and what the authentication and authority and whatnot, right? All that would live on the server, right? So this token, even though it's publicly available everywhere, right? It's only has meaning on the server side. The server side would unencrypt it, right, or map it to an actual session object, and then it would know who's currently logged in, right? So any data that would go back to the client would be authenticated first on the server, right, and would go back to the client. Plus, it would run some authentication logic, authorization logic, saying, all right, now that I know who you are, right, do you actually have permission to do that you're trying to do, right? So even if you are able to somehow navigate to an admin page by trying to fool the local browser, right? Your identity will always go back to the server. You have a token that the server generated that gave you that authority, right, to delete a user or to change some user or to change some password, right? So all that would work on the server.
Exactly, and the token would even change over time, right?
Yes,
So,
it would time out.
Yeah, even if you show the user ID this way,
Yes.
how do people use it? That's what I'm saying.
Exactly. If this is right, exactly. The thing is that in this particular case, we are when we get to the database, these are actually going to be IDs generated by the database, right? So they are actually mapping to physical things in the database, right? So you would not want to expose any of that outside. If somebody gets a hold of a database and actually tries to manipulate a user, right? So typically what you want to do is anonymize all communication that goes back to the client, right? That we would never be able to to identify any resource on the server.
And that's because of SQL injections, right?
Yeah, SQL injection is definitely one of the reasons. Yep. Okay. Yeah, typically what you do is that you encode all this thing in a token, right? That you time out every couple minutes, right? So that even if you have a token from somebody because they left a session open, right? Even if they copy the cookie or right and try to take it, that token is just going to be invalid pretty soon. Yeah. All right, awesome. Let's go on to websites. So as I was saying, there is structure to this URL, right? To this path, and what it tries to capture is the relationships that occur in the data model, right? In the data model, we mentioned the other day that there's a one-to-many relationship between users or developers creating many websites, right? So each website has a parent, yes? And once you have identified a particular developer or particular user, you can then identify all the websites for that particular developer, right? Now, since here we are not identifying a particular website, right? Then the interpretation for this is that you mean the entire collection of websites, right, for that user. So that's the interpretation of using the RESTful syntax that we're going to be using all throughout the semester. So in this case, the interpretation here is that you want the entire list of all the websites, right? And that would live inside the website array. Directory, and presumably there is a website list.view.client, right? That implements the list of all the websites. Yes, right. So let's work on that for a bit. So these are the controllers. This would be presumably there would be something like a website list controller, right? Which we don't have just yet. So I'm going to comment it out, right? So let's focus on navigating to that particular page, and I believe we already have the start of that page, which we worked on last week, which is inside of undergrads, and I wish this would not close for me every time. There it is, website list. Let's rename it. Let's rename it, and this would be website lists.view.client. Okay. And let's see if we can navigate there. Let's see if we are logged in as Bob, and then we navigate to website, right? It doesn't work. What? What's the error? Cannot find website templates. Is it in the right place? Oh, it's not in it's not in templates. Let's put it in the right place. Templates. Let's move this here. There we go. Let's refresh. Yes, there it is. Right. So there's our list of websites that we played around last week, and it's responsive. Right. It shows more columns as it becomes bigger. So it's the same exact implementation we had a week ago. Right. So let's now focus on this. Right. Let's see. It's first of all let's remove what we don't need. This is an injected partial piece of content, so we don't need any of this, right? And we don't need the body and the nav in the HTML. So let's do that. Let's refresh. Make sure. Notice that it was failing because it was trying to load something that didn't have a reference anymore. But if we reload, notice that it's no longer asking for that information. Everybody okay? Right. All right, so let's focus now on the fact that we want to fill in all that data, right? And again, the only one who can possibly provide that data is the controller, right? The controller is responsible for handling events and providing data for the view, right? So let's create a controller for this. We're going to copy an existing controller just because I'm lazy today. Let's grab a register controller and let's paste it in its correct place for controllers. Let's paste it in there, and let's call it website list controller. There it is. And let's rename a couple of things here. So this is, we're going to call it website list controller, right, in these three places. And now that we created this brand new file, let's not forget to load it as a controller in our index page. So let's create a brand new location here for that controller, and this is inside of website, and this is website list controller. There it is. So we're loading that. Everybody okay? All right. Let's continue. Let's open that up. Let's see. We have model. Yes, we're going to leave that. we're not going to use a user service. Let's see. Do we have event handlers? We don't know yet. So let's remove these event handlers. Just that one. Let's see. What do we want to do? The first thing that we need to do is retrieve the websites for that particular user. So we need to know who the user is, right? And that is being passed to us in the configuration. According to the configuration, we should be able to parse a user ID from the URL, right? From the route. Okay, and we saw how to do that yesterday. We can do that by using the route params. Yes, from the route params we can retrieve the user ID, maybe even store it in the model user ID. We can parse it out as route params. It's a map, and we can say user ID. Now we know the user ID. Once we know the user ID, we would like to be able to retrieve the websites for that user, right? And I believe we gave you some of that information for the assignment. We gave you a mapping of websites for user. So let's grab some of that information. Let's see, we had a website somewhere here. Okay, these are some of the websites. Let's grab that. Let's come back here, and here are the list of all the websites. The correct place for putting this is in the service. We'll do that in a minute. Right? For now, let's leave it here. All right, so we have all the websites, and the user ID that we're getting right now is, let's see, we have it's 234. Do we have any websites for 234? Let's see, developer 234, just one. Okay, we have just that one, chess. All right, so let's implement a function that will retrieve all the websites for a particular user. Right, a good name for that would be function find all websites for user, and it takes as an argument a user ID. Right, and this can iterate over all the array and looking for these things. Right, this is what the database would do. Right, it would iterate over a table looking for all the records that match a particular foreign key. Right. So let's see if we can put all the websites here. So all the results or result set as an empty array. Right. That we're going to push all the website objects in there as we find them. Right. So we can send them back to whoever asked for these. Right. So we're going to loop over the websites. Right. And if the website's sub w dot developer ID matches the user ID, then we're going to push into the result set. Right, we're going to push the actual website sub w, and the last thing is just we're going to return the result set. We could do filter, yes, yep. All right, so what we want to do is that the very first thing that when we come into this controller is run this find all websites for user. Yes, that's the very first thing that we want to do. Well, once we know what the user is, okay, we're going to run that. Let's see, we can do. We want to run that, so let's call find all websites. Let's pass it model.userid. Right, and when it comes back, we're going to assign it to the websites. Yes, right, and that's going to be rendered on the template. So the template is going to render. Let's put it right here. Let's see. It'll be model.websites. Right. So let's run that, and it didn't work. Wait, what? Website 234. Let's step through the code. Let's see. We have oh, I think we didn't bind the controller to the template, right? Probably forgot to do that. Let's go to the config, and indeed, yeah, the controller is not mapped to the template. Let's refresh. Indeed, we have one. Right, we have one lonely website, the chess. Or if we go to 1, 2, 3, Notice that we have Go, tic-tac-toe, and checkers, right? Or we have 1, 4, 3, 4, 5. We have no websites for there. Or we have 4, 5, 6. We have Facebook, Twitter, and Gizmodo. Yes? So we are indeed being able to retrieve this from the controller and pass it on to the view for rendering, right? And rendering is just trivial, right? So let's quickly do that. Right? Let's in the templates. So the templates would be where? That would be the template right here. Instead of pasting it here as hard coded, what we're going to do is we're going to grab the the line item. Okay, that's the header, right? Let's use these line items down here as a template. Let's remove these bogus values down here. Let's use the very first one as a template for just copying and pasting these LIs for every single instance of the of the websites in the array. Right? So we can say repeat. So copy and paste this LI for every website in model websites. Right? In the array of model websites. Yes, the one we just displayed. Now we have a local variable website and display here the website name. I think is that what it's called? Let's see, website, yeah, name. What else do we want to display? Let's see, date. I don't believe we have a date, do we? But it would be website. Website. What was here? This was created, which I don't believe we have one. And let's see, created. This is accessed. No, updated. Okay, this would be updated. Updated. And the last one was supposed to be just empty, so nothing after that. So let's see what this comes back as. If we re-render, notice that indeed we have Facebook, Twitter, and Gizmodo rendering. Right, but we don't have any created or updated. So let's create some dummy content for that. Let's see, we could do, what we could do is in the controller, as we iterate over this, if we find the website, let's add a value on the fly. We'll say created is equal to new date, and updated, just new date. All right, eventually these will be values that will be implemented by the server or database. Right. So let's see. There we go. So we have some dates. We can format it. Right. We can format it using several filters. There's a date filter that has a default format, which just renders it as a month, day, and year. But you can certainly format it to be longer or shorter in different formats. Everybody okay? So this behaves exactly as we expect. All right? All right, so let's keep going.